The next morning, Daniel woke up feeling a quiet sense of focus. The previous days had tested his patience and composure, but he knew that the situation with Karen and Tommy was still far from over. The HOA board had not yet made its decision, and he could feel the tension in the neighborhood like a gentle but constant hum. Today, he needed to stay calm, organized, and ready for anything that might come his way. After breakfast, Daniel stepped outside to check on the Harley. The bike gleamed in the sunlight, polished and ready for a ride, but Daniel had no intention of leaving it unattended. He ran his hands over the smooth surface, feeling a sense of pride. It was not just a machine. It was a symbol of his effort, patience, and integrity. From across the street, Tommy appeared again, riding his small bicycle with a sense of urgency. Karen was close behind, holding her phone and speaking quietly but firmly. Daniel could tell that they had been talking and planning. He sighed softly, knowing that he had to remain calm and prepared. Tommy approached first, his tone sharper than usual. "You know, my mom says you really need to think about giving that bike away. She says it is not fair for you to have it when others want it." Daniel smiled gently. "Tommy, I understand that you like the bike. It is impressive, but it is mine. I earned it and I am following all the rules. I cannot give it away just because someone wants it." Karen stepped forward, holding her phone in one hand. "Daniel, I have been in touch with the HOA board. They want to review everything about this situation. We need to be sure that all the guidelines are being followed. It is important for the neighborhood." Daniel nodded politely. "I completely understand, Mrs. Thompson. That is why I have kept detailed records of everything related to the bike. I have maintenance logs, purchase receipts, and notes about where it is parked and how it is stored. I want to make it easy for the board to see that I have followed the rules completely." Karen glanced at Tommy, who looked frustrated but slightly uncertain. The boy was used to having his demands taken seriously, but Daniel's calm, prepared approach had made him pause. Karen's usual authority seemed tempered by the presence of facts and clear evidence. Daniel continued, his voice steady and confident. "I also want to mention that I have been in contact with the state attorney's office regarding property rights in neighborhood disputes. They provided guidance on how to handle situations like this. My intention is not to cause conflict, but to make sure everything is fair and transparent." Karen's expression shifted again. She seemed surprised and perhaps a little uneasy. You already contacted the state attorney?" she asked slowly. "Yes," Daniel replied calmly. "I wanted to make sure I handled everything correctly. That way, if the board has any questions, I can provide accurate information and documentation." Tommy looked at his mother and then back at Daniel. "Mom, what does this mean?" "Does it mean we can't do anything?" Karen hesitated, thinking carefully. "It means we need to be careful. We cannot make demands without evidence or authority. The board will review and we must follow their instructions. But this doesn't mean the situation is resolved yet." Daniel nodded politely. "Exactly. I am ready to cooperate fully. I want the process to be clear, fair, and professional. That way there will be no misunderstandings." Karen looked at Daniel for a long moment, her expression softening slightly. She was used to controlling situations, but Daniel's calm and organized approach had changed the dynamic. Tommy, too, seemed less confident, realizing that his usual tactics of demands and complaints would not work here. Daniel decided to take the initiative further. "Mrs. Thompson, Tommy," he said, "I am also willing to meet with the HOA board in person. I can show them all the details and explain everything about the bike, the rules, and my compliance. I want to make sure everyone understands and that the situation is resolved properly." Karen nodded slowly, clearly impressed by Daniel's willingness to cooperate. "That is reasonable. I will pass your offer to the board. They will appreciate the transparency." Tommy muttered something, clearly unhappy, but he said nothing further. Daniel had effectively neutralized his attempts to intimidate or demand. The boy was learning that calm, clear communication and preparation were more powerful than noise or complaints. As Karen and Tommy walked back to their house, Daniel returned to the Harley. He ran his hands over the smooth surface again, feeling a mixture of pride and determination. He had handled the confrontation without anger, without fear, and without violating any rules. Every word, every action had been deliberate and thoughtful. Later that afternoon, Daniel received a message from his legal advisor. They had reviewed the HOA rules and the situation in detail and confirmed that he was fully within his rights. Daniel took notes, keeping a clear record of the guidance and advice he had received. He knew that being organized and prepared would strengthen his position and make it easier to handle the board's review. As the sun began to set, Daniel decided to take a short ride around the neighborhood. The smooth hum of the Harley beneath him was calming, and the warm breeze helped clear his mind. He waved to neighbors as he passed, maintaining friendly relations while keeping his focus on the pending situation with Karen and the HOA. Returning home, Daniel parked the Harley carefully and wiped it down once more. He felt a sense of calm satisfaction. The situation was not yet fully resolved, but he had handled every step with intelligence, patience, and preparation. He had turned a potentially stressful confrontation into an example of calm authority and fairness. That evening, Karen appeared at the end of the driveway once again. She was holding a letter from the HOA board, looking slightly uncertain. "Daniel, the board has reviewed the situation," she said. "They have acknowledged your compliance with the rules and your documentation. They also noted your proactive communication and legal consultation." Daniel nodded politely. "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. I appreciate the board's review and guidance. My goal was always to follow the rules and ensure everything is handled properly." Karen glanced at Tommy, who looked both surprised and somewhat impressed. "It seems the board agrees with you. I did not expect this outcome," she admitted softly. Daniel smiled kindly. "I understand, Mrs. Thompson. The important thing is that we all respect the process and follow the rules. That way the neighborhood remains orderly, and everyone knows their rights and responsibilities." Tommy finally spoke, his voice quieter than usual. "I guess. I learned that being loud or demanding doesn't always work. You need to be prepared and know what you are doing." Daniel nodded. "Exactly, Tommy. Calmness, preparation, and respect go a long way. It is important to know the rules and follow them even when things get challenging." Karen gave a small nod, a gesture of reluctant respect. "You handled this well, Daniel. I will be more mindful in the future about making assumptions or trying to enforce my own ideas without proper review." Daniel smiled and patted the Harley gently. "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. I hope this situation can now serve as a positive example for everyone in the neighborhood." With that, Karen and Tommy walked back to their house, leaving Daniel standing beside his Harley. The street was quiet, the air calm, and the sun had just dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the neighborhood. Daniel felt a deep sense of accomplishment. He had faced a persistent challenge, handled it with intelligence and patience, and maintained his integrity throughout. As Daniel closed the garage door and turned on the porch light, he reflected on the events of the past few days. The situation with Karen and Tommy had tested his patience, his communication skills, and his ability to remain calm under pressure. Yet he had succeeded, proving that knowledge, preparation, and respect were far more powerful than shouting, complaints, or demands. The Harley gleamed under the soft light, a symbol of Daniel's hard work, determination, and careful planning. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet and peaceful once again, and Daniel knew that he had not only protected his property, but also set an example of how challenges could be handled calmly and fairly. The sun had just started to dip behind the rows of neatly trimmed houses in Willow Creek, casting long shadows across the streets. The neighborhood was quiet, almost too quiet, except for the occasional hum of a lawnmower or the bark of a dog somewhere down the lane. Among these peaceful homes, Daniel stood beside his prized possession, a sleek black Harley-Davidson parked neatly in front of his garage. The bike gleamed in the fading sunlight, its polished chrome reflecting the last warm rays of the day. Daniel ran his hand across the handlebars, a small smile on his face. He had worked hard for this bike, saving every extra dollar from his job at the local auto shop. And now, it was finally his. Daniel loved everything about the Harley. Its smooth lines, the deep growl of its engine, and the way it made him feel free whenever he took it out for a ride. It was not just a bike. It was a symbol of independence and pride. And in a neighborhood like Willow Creek, where everyone seemed to have an opinion about everything, his Harley stood out. Some neighbors admired it, while others looked at it with a hint of jealousy. Karen Thompson, better known in the neighborhood as HOA Karen, lived 2 houses down from Daniel. Karen was a woman who loved rules, lists, and control. Her eyes seemed to always be on the lookout for anything that did not fit the strict standards of the homeowners association. She often sent emails about lawn heights, mailbox colors, and even the way holiday lights were hung. Everyone knew that if Karen had an opinion, it was best to either agree or risk getting a notice. Karen had a son, Tommy, who was about 17. He was loud, confident, and used to getting what he wanted. Daniel had seen Tommy a few times before, usually when he was showing off something new or trying to impress a friend. Today, however, Daniel noticed Tommy standing near the end of the driveway staring at his Harley. Tommy's eyes widened as he took in the gleaming black bike, and Daniel felt a small twinge of worry. He had seen this look before. It was the look of someone convinced that what they wanted should belong to them. Daniel straightened up and called out, "Hey, Tommy, how's it going?" His voice was calm but firm, a polite way to acknowledge the presence without giving any hint of fear. Tommy walked closer, his hands stuffed into the pockets of his hoodie. "Nice bike," he said, his tone carrying a mix of admiration and entitlement. "Where did you even get it?" "I saved for it," Daniel replied simply. "It's mine." Tommy laughed softly, a sound that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Mine?" he echoed. "It looks way cooler than anything I have. You should just give it to me. I could take care of it better than you." Daniel felt his smile fade slightly. He had dealt with neighbors before, but this was different. Tommy wasn't asking politely. He was demanding. And in Willow Creek, a demand backed by Karen often meant trouble. "Tommy, I appreciate the compliment, but this bike is mine. I worked hard for it." Tommy shrugged, as if Daniel's words were just background noise. "Whatever," he said. "I'm going to tell my mom about this. She'll make you give it to me. You don't even know who you're dealing with." Daniel's heart sank for a moment, but he kept his tone calm. "That's fine. You can tell her. She can come over and talk if she wants. But it's still my bike." Tommy smirked and turned away, walking back toward his house. Daniel watched him go, knowing that this encounter was not over. In Willow Creek, disputes rarely ended quickly, especially when Karen was involved. She had a reputation for escalating things, and Daniel had learned the hard way that ignoring her was not an option. As the evening settled in, Daniel decided to take a short ride to clear his mind. The roar of the Harley under his hands was soothing, a reminder of the freedom it offered. He rode along the winding streets, the crisp air filling his lungs, and for a moment, he forgot about Tommy and the looming confrontation. When he returned, he noticed Tommy was outside again, this time with Karen. She was wearing her usual expression of concern mixed with authority, holding a clipboard and looking every bit like the person in charge of the neighborhood. Daniel took a deep breath, preparing for what was about to come. Karen's voice carried across the driveway. "Daniel, we need to talk about that motorcycle. Tommy says you should not have it here without permission from the HOA. Daniel nodded politely, keeping his tone steady. "Hello, Mrs. Thompson. I understand your concern, but I've checked the rules. There's nothing in the HOA guidelines that says I can't have a motorcycle in my driveway. It's my property." Karen frowned, her eyes narrowing slightly. "I think the rules are clear. You need approval for any large vehicles outside. We cannot have the neighborhood looking untidy." Daniel remained calm, refusing to rise to the bait. "I understand your perspective, but I've looked at the rules carefully. The bike is parked neatly and it does not block anyone. I'm not violating any guidelines." Tommy crossed his arms, smirking as he watched his mother. "See, Mom? He doesn't even care. He's just being difficult." Karen sighed, shaking her head. "I will contact the HOA board. They will make the decision." Daniel nodded again. "That's fine. I welcome any discussion. I know my rights and I am happy to explain them to the board." There was a pause. Karen looked slightly frustrated that Daniel was so composed. Tommy, on the other hand, seemed puzzled. He wasn't used to people standing up calmly to him and refusing to back down. After a few minutes, Karen turned and walked back toward her house, muttering something about rules and neighborhood standards. Tommy followed, glancing back once at Daniel's Harley. Daniel exhaled, feeling a mix of relief and anticipation. He knew that the next few days would be interesting. Karen would likely push harder, and Tommy might try other tactics. But Daniel felt ready. He had done everything by the book, and he had prepared for situations exactly like this. As he walked back into his house, he glanced at the Harley parked in the driveway. It seemed to shine brighter under the streetlights, as if encouraging him to stay calm and confident. Daniel had always believed that patience and knowledge were the best tools in any conflict. Today, that belief was about to be tested. The rest of the evening passed quietly. Daniel made himself a cup of tea and sat by the window, keeping an eye on the street. He noticed other neighbors returning home from work, exchanging polite greetings, completely unaware of the small storm brewing a few houses down. Daniel thought about the best way to handle the situation. He didn't want an argument, and he certainly didn't want trouble with the law. Yet he also knew that standing firm was necessary. This was not just about a motorcycle. It was about respect and fairness. He couldn't let someone claim what was rightfully his simply because they thought they deserved it more. By the time night fully settled in, Daniel felt a quiet confidence. He had done everything correctly, followed the rules, and was ready for whatever came next. He went to bed knowing that the next day might bring a new challenge, but he was prepared to meet it calmly and smartly. Outside, the street was silent, the only sound the occasional rustle of leaves in the gentle wind. The Harley sat waiting, gleaming in the moonlight, a symbol of Daniel's hard work and determination. Whatever Karen and Tommy tried, Daniel was ready. He had patience, knowledge, and the quiet strength that came from doing the right thing. And so, the stage was set for the conflict to come, a small neighborhood drama that promised to be far more interesting than anyone could have imagined. The next morning, Daniel woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside his window. The sunlight streamed gently through the blinds, casting warm stripes across his bedroom floor. He stretched and walked over to the window, glancing down the street. Everything looked calm, almost too calm. Yet Daniel had a feeling that today would be different. He had learned over the years that when conflicts started in Willow Creek, they rarely faded on their own. As he sipped his coffee in the kitchen, Daniel heard the faint sound of footsteps outside. Pulling back the curtain, he saw Tommy standing near the Harley again. This time he was joined by a neighbor Daniel did not recognize, a tall man carrying a clipboard, who looked official in a simple suit. Daniel frowned slightly, unsure who the man was or why he was here. Tommy waved at Daniel with an exaggerated gesture. "Morning, neighbor," he called, his voice dripping with false cheerfulness. "I think we need to talk about the bike again." Daniel set his coffee down and walked outside, keeping his tone calm and polite. "Good morning, Tommy, and hello. Can I help you?" The man with the clipboard stepped forward. "I'm Mr. Lewis from the HOA board," he said, offering a small nod. "We received a complaint about the motorcycle in the driveway. I'm here to gather some information before the board makes any decisions." Daniel smiled politely. "Of course. I've already checked the rules and I can provide any details you need. The bike is parked properly and it does not block any sidewalks or driveways." Mr. Lewis took out a pen and notebook, flipping it open. "Thank you. We like to handle these situations fairly. Could you tell me how long you have owned the bike and where it is usually kept?" Daniel answered clearly, explaining that he had purchased the Harley 6 months ago after saving for years. "It stays here in the driveway or in my garage," he said. "I take it out for rides on weekends or evenings and I make sure it is always parked neatly. I want to respect the neighborhood while also enjoying my property." Tommy scoffed, rolling his eyes. "See, he's trying to act like he's perfect. I bet he just doesn't want to give it to me." Daniel ignored Tommy's comment, keeping his attention on Mr. Lewis. "I understand that complaints happen, but I can assure you that I follow all rules. The bike is mine and I have the right to keep it here." Mr. Lewis paused, writing down a few notes. "I see, thank you for explaining everything. We will review the guidelines and make a decision. Until then, I advise everyone to remain calm and avoid any direct conflicts." Karen appeared at the end of the driveway, her expression a mix of frustration and determination. "Daniel, this is serious," she said firmly. "I expect you to comply with HOA rules. This situation is not just about a bike. It's about respect and order in the community." Daniel nodded politely. "I understand your concern, Mrs. Thompson. I want to follow the rules, but as I explained, I have checked them carefully. My bike is parked according to the guidelines." Karen sighed and muttered something about making a phone call. Daniel could see Tommy's smirk growing. The boy seemed confident that his mother's influence would tip the scales in their favor. "I think it is best to wait for the board's decision," Daniel said calmly. "That way everyone knows the outcome is fair." Karen shook her head, clearly displeased. "We will see about that," she said, turning back toward her house. Daniel felt a quiet sense of relief once they left, but he also knew this was far from over. Tommy was not used to hearing no, and Karen was not used to being questioned politely. He needed to be ready for whatever came next, Later that afternoon, as Daniel worked on cleaning the Harley, he noticed Tommy walking toward him again. This time, the boy seemed even more determined. "You really think you can just keep it?" Tommy asked, crossing his arms. "My mom says you have to give it to me. She said I deserve it more. You should just hand it over." Daniel wiped his hands on a cloth and looked at Tommy calmly. "Tommy, I understand you like the bike, but it is not yours. It belongs to me. I earned it and I have the right to keep it." Tommy frowned, his confidence slightly shaken. "You don't get it. My mom is in charge here. You can't just ignore her." Daniel smiled gently. "I'm not ignoring anyone. I'm just explaining the facts. The rules support me and I am following them. That is all I need to do." Tommy hesitated, unsure of how to respond. He had expected Daniel to argue or back down, but instead Daniel remained calm and firm. It was not what Tommy was used to. As the sun started to set, Daniel heard the familiar sound of a police siren in the distance. His heart sank for a moment, knowing what was about to happen. Tommy had likely called the cops, hoping they would force him to give up the bike. A few minutes later, 2 officers arrived at the scene, walking toward Daniel with polite but cautious expressions. Daniel greeted them calmly. "Good evening, officers. How can I help you?" Officer Miller stepped forward. "We received a call about a dispute regarding a motorcycle. Can you explain what is happening?" Daniel nodded. "Of course. Tommy and his mother, Karen, have expressed concerns about my bike. I have reviewed the HOA rules carefully, and my bike is parked according to all guidelines. I am happy to explain this to you." The officers listened attentively as Daniel calmly described the situation, showing them that he had followed every rule and was prepared for any questions. Officer Miller exchanged a glance with his partner and then nodded. "Thank you for explaining," Officer Miller said. "It seems like there is no law being broken. This appears to be a neighborhood dispute. We recommend that you continue to handle it politely and avoid any escalation." Daniel thanked the officers, feeling a small sense of relief. The police had confirmed what he already knew. He was in the right. Tommy's face fell. He had hoped the police would side with him, but Daniel had handled the situation so calmly and clearly that there was no room for misunderstanding. He muttered something under his breath and stormed back toward his house, clearly frustrated. Daniel returned to his Harley, running his hand over the polished metal. He felt a mix of pride and determination. This was not just about a bike. It was about standing up for what was right, handling challenges calmly and not letting anyone push him around. As night fell, Daniel thought about the next steps. He knew Karen would not give up easily, and Tommy might try other tactics. But Daniel had an advantage. He was prepared, patient, and fully aware of his rights. He also had a plan in place in case things escalated further. The stars began to shine above Willow Creek, and Daniel felt a quiet satisfaction. He had faced the first round of challenges with grace and intelligence. Whatever happened next, he was ready to handle it calmly and cleverly. And in the distance, the lights of the neighborhood reflected softly off the Harley, a reminder that patience, preparation, and confidence could handle almost any problem. The morning after the police visit, Daniel felt a quiet determination as he stepped outside. The air was crisp and fresh, carrying the faint scent of blooming flowers from neighbors' gardens. His Harley sat gleaming in the driveway, reflecting the sunlight like a badge of pride. Daniel ran his hand along the handlebars and felt a sense of calm. He knew the previous day had tested his patience, and today he needed to stay alert. From the corner of his eye, he noticed movement across the street. Tommy was back, standing near the sidewalk with a determined look. Daniel also saw Karen behind him, arms crossed and face set in the familiar expression of authority and displeasure. She had not given up. Daniel exhaled slowly, reminding himself to remain composed. Tommy stepped forward, attempting to act confident. "You know, my mom said this isn't over," he said. "She's going to make sure the HOA enforces the rules." "You can't just ignore her," Daniel nodded politely. "I understand, Tommy. I know your mother cares about the neighborhood. I respect that. But I also have the right to follow the rules and keep my property. I've done everything according to the guidelines, and I plan to continue doing so." Karen walked closer, her voice firm. "Daniel, I don't think you understand. The rules exist for a reason. A motorcycle like that doesn't belong just anywhere. The board will review this, and you need to be prepared to follow their decision." Daniel remained calm, but inside he felt a surge of readiness. He had anticipated situations like this and had prepared for them, Mrs. Thompson, I respect the board's role and I welcome their review. At the same time, I want to ensure that the decision is based on facts. The bike is parked neatly and does not violate any specific rule. Tommy muttered under his breath, clearly frustrated that Daniel refused to show anger or hesitation. He had expected this confrontation to be easy, but Daniel's calmness made it difficult for him to gain any ground. Daniel decided it was time to take action in a proactive way. He had already consulted a legal expert on HOA matters a few weeks ago, anticipating that disputes could arise. Now he felt it was the right moment to put that knowledge to use. Mrs. Thompson, Tommy, Daniel said, I want to make sure this situation is handled properly. Because of previous HOA issues in the neighborhood, I've spoken with the state attorney's office regarding property rights. They have advised me on the proper way to handle any disputes related to ownership and neighborhood regulations. Karen's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise passing across her face. Tommy's jaw dropped and he stumbled over his words. State attorney? He asked, his voice uncertain. Daniel nodded calmly. Yes, I wanted to ensure that everything here is handled fairly and legally. If the HOA board or anyone else has questions, I can provide their guidance. This is not meant to be confrontational. I simply want everyone to understand the rules and respect property rights. Karen stepped back slightly, her confident demeanor showing a hint of hesitation. I see, she said slowly. Well, that changes things. I didn't realize you had already consulted the proper authorities. Tommy looked confused. Mom, what does this mean? Does it mean we can't do anything? Karen gave him a small shake of her head, clearly thinking through the new information. Daniel could see the shift in their energy. The boy's boldness had faltered, and Karen's usual certainty was interrupted by the mention of the state attorney. Daniel continued, maintaining his calm and firm tone. This isn't about winning or losing. It's about making sure that we all follow the proper process. The bike is legally mine, and I am prepared to explain everything clearly if the HOA or anyone else wants to review it. That way there are no misunderstandings and everyone knows the facts. Tommy's frustration grew. He had thought this would be simple. He could have relied on his mother's influence to get what he wanted, but Daniel had anticipated the challenge. The boy's attempts to intimidate or demand suddenly felt weak in comparison to Daniel's calm knowledge and preparation. Karen, on the other hand, was trying to maintain authority. Daniel, I appreciate that you want to follow the law, but you need to understand that as a neighbor we have expectations. The HOA is concerned about appearances and order. That is why I brought this to your attention. Daniel nodded respectfully. I understand. I want to respect the neighborhood and keep it in good order. That is why I have kept the bike clean, parked properly, and always considerate of others. I am confident that the board will see that I have done everything correctly. Karen glanced at Tommy, who looked at the ground. You see, Tommy? Sometimes following the rules is more than just wanting something. You have to consider the facts and fairness. Tommy's face showed a mixture of confusion and reluctant understanding. He was not used to having his demands questioned, especially without anger or confrontation. Daniel's calm approach had disrupted the usual patterns he relied on. After a moment, Karen straightened up, adjusting her jacket. I will bring this to the board. I expect you to cooperate with them fully. Daniel smiled politely. Absolutely. I welcome any review and I am happy to provide any information needed. Karen hesitated for a moment, clearly debating whether to say more. Finally, she nodded. Very well. We will see what the board decides. Tommy muttered something, but it was clear that the boy had no more immediate arguments. He turned and walked back toward his house, casting a glance at Daniel's Harley that held a mixture of envy and admiration. Once they were gone, Daniel allowed himself a small sigh of relief. He had handled the situation with patience, clarity, and preparation. By calmly explaining his position and showing that he had legal support, he had prevented an immediate escalation and reminded them that the rules applied equally to everyone. Later that afternoon, Daniel received a phone call from his legal advisor. They had already anticipated a potential HOA conflict and provided guidance on how to handle it professionally. Daniel followed their instructions carefully, making notes and preparing documents in case the board requested proof of compliance. By evening, the street had returned to its usual calm. Daniel cleaned the Harley once more, running a soft cloth over every shiny surface. He felt a sense of pride. not just in the bike, but in the way he had handled the confrontation. He had turned a potentially stressful situation into an example of calm, knowledge, and preparation. The sun dipped low, painting the sky with warm shades of orange and pink. Daniel leaned against the Harley, reflecting on the day. He knew the board would eventually make a decision, and Karen and Tommy might continue to push, but he felt confident. He had the facts, he had preparation, and most importantly, he had patience. Daniel realized that this experience had taught him something valuable. Conflicts were not always about who shouted the loudest or demanded the most. Often they were about understanding the rules, staying calm, and being ready with the right information. By showing respect, knowledge, and composure, he had already taken the most powerful steps to resolve the situation fairly. That night, as Daniel closed the garage and turned on the small porch light, he felt a quiet satisfaction. He had faced the challenge with intelligence and calmness, and he had sent a clear message. He would not be intimidated, but he would handle the situation with fairness and professionalism. The Harley gleamed under the soft light, a symbol of Daniel's hard work and determination. Outside, Willow Creek was calm, but Daniel knew that the story was not finished. The HOA board would review the case, Karen might raise additional concerns, and Tommy might try to find another way to assert himself. Yet Daniel felt ready. He had faced the confrontation head-on, and he had done so without anger, without fear, and without breaking any rules. Whatever came next, he knew he would handle it wisely and confidently, proving that patience and preparation were more powerful than shouting or threats. As the stars appeared one by one in the night sky, Daniel smiled to himself. He had faced a challenge, stood his ground, and learned that the right approach could turn a tense situation into an opportunity for respect and understanding. The morning after the HOA board's review, Daniel woke up feeling a quiet sense of relief. The past few days had been challenging, with Karen and Tommy pressing their complaints and the neighborhood tension rising. But now, the process was complete, and the board had confirmed that Daniel had followed all the rules. His Harley was safe, and his efforts to remain calm and prepared had paid off. He stepped outside, taking a deep breath of the crisp morning air. The street was calm, with neighbors going about their routines. Daniel looked at the Harley parked neatly in his driveway. Its polished chrome reflected the soft sunlight, reminding him of all the work he had done, not just to earn the bike, but to handle the situation with patience and respect. As he cleaned a few spots on the bike, he noticed Karen standing at the end of her driveway watching him. Tommy was beside her, his usual boldness replaced by a more thoughtful expression. Daniel waved politely, keeping his tone friendly and calm. "Good morning, Mrs. Thompson." "Good morning, Tommy," Daniel said. "I hope everything is going well today." Karen stepped closer, a hint of a smile appearing on her face. "Good morning, Daniel. I wanted to thank you for handling the situation so professionally. I know I was persistent, but you remained calm and clear throughout. The board appreciated your preparation and willingness to cooperate." Daniel nodded politely. "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. My goal was always to follow the rules and make sure everyone understood the facts. I am glad the board's review confirmed that." Tommy shuffled his feet, clearly unsure of what to say. Finally, he spoke quietly. "I guess I learned something. Being loud or demanding doesn't always work. Sometimes you have to think carefully, stay calm, and follow the rules." Daniel smiled warmly. "Exactly, Tommy. Understanding the rules and being prepared is more important than trying to force things. You can achieve a lot by staying patient and respectful, even when situations feel frustrating." Karen nodded, clearly taking in Daniel's words. "I see that now. I think we all can learn from this experience. I will be more careful in the future about making assumptions or trying to enforce my own ideas without proper review." Daniel felt a sense of satisfaction. The confrontation had been resolved without anger, threats, or unnecessary drama. Everyone had learned something valuable, and the neighborhood could return to its usual calm and friendly atmosphere. Later, that afternoon, Daniel decided to take his Harley out for a ride. The smooth hum of the engine beneath him brought a sense of freedom and relaxation. As he drove through the neighborhood streets, he waved to neighbors and enjoyed the warm breeze. The ride was not just about enjoying the bike, it was a way to celebrate patience, preparation, and the peaceful resolution of a difficult situation. As he returned home, Daniel noticed Karen and Tommy outside again. This time their demeanor was different, calmer, more respectful. Karen approached him with a small envelope in her hand. "Daniel," she said, "I wanted to give this to you. It's a note from the HOA board acknowledging your cooperation and your respectful handling of the situation." Daniel took the envelope politely. "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. I appreciate it. I hope this can serve as a positive example for everyone in the neighborhood." Karen nodded. "I think it will. Tommy has learned an important lesson about patience and respect, and I have learned about the value of listening carefully and following proper procedures." Tommy looked at Daniel, a shy smile forming on his face. "Thanks for showing me that standing firm doesn't mean being rude. I guess I still have a lot to learn, but I will try to do better." Daniel smiled kindly. "You are welcome, Tommy. The important thing is that you are willing to learn. That shows maturity and strength." After Karen and Tommy returned to their house, Daniel went back to the Harley, running his hands over the polished metal. The bike gleamed in the late afternoon sun, a symbol of not just his hard work but also his patience, intelligence, and careful planning. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing that he had protected his property, while teaching a lesson in respect and fairness. The neighborhood seemed peaceful again, the tension of the past days fading into a sense of normalcy. Daniel realized that this experience had taught him more than just dealing with an HOA conflict. He had learned the importance of staying calm, preparing thoroughly, and handling challenges with respect and intelligence. These lessons were valuable not just for this situation, but for life in general. That evening, Daniel decided to share a small moment of reflection. He sat on his porch looking at the Harley in the driveway and thinking about how easily situations could escalate if handled without care. He thought about Karen and Tommy and how the confrontation had shifted because of calm communication, knowledge, and respect. It was a reminder that patience and preparation often worked better than anger or force. As the sky turned shades of orange and pink, Daniel noticed a few neighbors walking their dogs and children playing nearby. He smiled, feeling grateful that the neighborhood could enjoy peace and harmony again. The Harley had remained safe. The conflict had been resolved fairly and valuable lessons had been learned by everyone involved. Daniel realized that the story of the past week would likely become part of neighborhood conversations. People would remember how he handled the situation with Karen and Tommy, how he remained calm, followed the rules, and used careful preparation to resolve a difficult conflict. It was a quiet victory, one that brought respect rather than resentment, and Daniel felt proud of that. As night fell, Daniel closed the garage door and turned on the porch light, giving the Harley a final glance. Its polished chrome reflected the light softly, as if acknowledging the hard work, patience, and intelligence that had gone into protecting it. Daniel knew that he had not just safeguarded a bike, but also demonstrated the power of calmness, preparation, and respect in handling any challenge. Before heading inside, Daniel took a final walk around the driveway. The street was quiet, and the stars began to appear one by one in the clear night sky. He felt a sense of peace knowing that the situation with Karen and Tommy was truly resolved. The lessons learned would stay with him, Tommy, and even Karen, shaping how they approached conflicts in the future. Daniel returned to his porch, taking a seat and reflecting on the journey. The Harley, the confrontation, and the resolution had all taught him something valuable. That knowledge, patience, and respectful communication were far more powerful than arguments or demands. By remaining calm and prepared, he had turned a tense situation into a positive outcome for everyone. Finally, as the neighborhood settled into quiet night, Daniel felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The Harley stood gleaming in the driveway, a symbol of hard work and perseverance. Karen and Tommy had learned lessons about patience, respect, and the importance of following rules. And Daniel had proven that challenges could be handled with intelligence, composure, and integrity. With that thought, he went inside, closing the door behind him. The conflict was over. The neighborhood was at peace, And Daniel knew that he had set a strong example of how challenges could be met with respect, calmness, and careful preparation. He smiled, feeling content, proud, and ready for whatever life might bring next.